Years ago, I was stationed at a military dive unit on the Gulf Coast. Most days were routine. Gear checks, shallow dives, and endless maintenance. But one afternoon turned into the single most terrifying experience of my career. It was late in the day. The sky was shifting from blue to gray, that heavy Gulf humidity clinging to everything. We were just wrapping up when a senior commander, the kind of guy who walks like he owns the ocean, storms into the locker room. He slams his gear down and demands we requalify his dive certification right now. My team lead, a crusty old warrant officer who didn't have patience for stupidity, tried to talk him down. He told him straight. The weather was changing. The Gulf was turning ugly fast, and this could wait. But the commander didn't care. Rank has its privileges, right? So, orders were orders. We grabbed our gear and headed out. The waves were already starting to build, wind cutting harder than before. 30 minutes offshore, the water had turned from turquoise to dark steel. I hit the water first, the commander right behind me. Instantly, I knew something was wrong. Visibility was maybe 5 feet at best. The currents felt erratic, tugging, shifting directions like something was moving beneath us. We descended slowly, my hand always brushing the line back to the surface. 2 minutes in, as I'm checking the commander's gear setup, I feel a sudden, sharp tug on my safety line, the emergency signal from the boat. Abort, surface, now. I look over to the commander, signal him to ascend. He shakes his head and points downward, insisting we continue. I hesitate, give the signal again, firm this time. He refuses, waving me off like I'm some rookie wasting his time. Then the line jerks again, harder. Whatever was happening up top, it was serious. That was it for me. I swam up, grabbed the commander by his harness, and yanked him upward, whether he liked it or not. I could feel him struggling against me, furious, even underwater, but I wasn't asking permission anymore. We broke the surface, and immediately he's screaming through his regulator, ripping it out, red-faced, barking orders, cursing me for dragging him up. But then, over all that noise, my team lead, the guy who never raised his voice, lets out a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't a yell. It was a raw, primal scream. He's pointing past us, out over the water. I turn, and there it is. A massive waterspout, maybe a mile out, twisting across the surface of the Gulf and moving straight toward us. It didn't look like weather. It looked alive. The water around it boiled and lifted, like the sea itself had teeth. Everything happened at once. We started tearing off gear, scrambling up onto the deck, slipping and shouting. The wind howled so loud it drowned out the engines. The radio blasted static, lights flickered, and for a moment the world felt unreal. All gray water and roaring wind. We pushed that boat harder than I thought possible, bouncing over waves, spray hitting our faces like needles. The spout kept closing the distance, chewing across the surface like it was hunting us. I remember glancing back once, just once, and seeing that dark column split the horizon. It felt personal, and for the first time, the commander was silent, completely silent. My team lead, soaked and furious, was ripping into him the whole way back, screaming that his arrogance nearly got us killed. And for once, no one argued. Rank didn't matter anymore, not out there. We made it back just as the storm slammed into the coast. Rain hit the concrete like shrapnel. We sat in the locker room afterward, soaked, shaking, saying nothing. No one even looked at the commander. That day still gives me chills, because in those few minutes, I felt something I've never felt before in all my dives, that the ocean knew we were there, and it didn't want us. Sometimes, even now, when the water gets quiet and the sky turns that same gray, I get that feeling again, like the sea remembers. It happened in November of 2004. I was 15, young enough to think nothing bad could ever really happen to me. I lived in Fishhook, a quiet seaside town near Cape Town where everyone knew everyone. The kind of place where you grew up barefoot, sunburnt, and salt-stained. For my birthday that year, my parents had given me the only thing I'd wanted for years, a surfboard. It was my ticket to freedom. Every spare minute I was out on the waves, chasing that rush. That morning, I woke up before sunrise for no reason at all. The world outside was still dark, only a thin line of gold bleeding over the horizon. Something in me felt restless, almost like the sea itself was calling. I got up quietly, grabbed my board, and slipped out the door before my mom even stirred. The air was sharp and cold, filled with that heavy salt smell that stings your nose and wakes you better than coffee ever could. A few lights flicked on in houses as I passed. It wasn't even 7 yet. By the time I hit the sand, the sky had turned pink and silver. The ocean looked calm, hypnotic. I paddled out, the cold biting into my skin, but I didn't care. The waves were perfect, long, clean, breaking smooth across the bay. I caught one, then another. It was quiet except for the hiss of the surf. That's when something hit me, hard. My board jolted up beneath me, almost throwing me off. A violent, unseen force slammed from below. The sound, that thud, echoed through the water and into my bones. I froze. Every sound vanished except my heartbeat. The water bubbled and frothed under me, a swirl of white foam. And then, nothing. Silence. I knew the stories. Everyone in Fishhook did. This bay had seen its share of shark attacks. One every couple of years, they'd say, usually with a laugh. But in that moment, it didn't feel like a story. It felt like death had brushed past me and decided to move on. I waited, barely breathing, my eyes locked on the dark water. Every second stretched like an hour. Finally, when the tide began pushing me back toward shore, I started paddling. Slow, deliberate, every muscle tense. When I finally reached the beach, I just sat there, shaking, staring out at the endless blue. Part of me thought I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just a log or a wave. Maybe I was being dramatic. That's when I saw her, Tina Webb. Everyone in town knew her. She swam in that bay every morning, always wearing that bright red cap. She waved to me once or twice before, but this time I just watched. She smiled faintly, like always, waded into the shallows, and started swimming her usual route. I almost called out. I almost said something, but the words never came. I told myself I was being stupid, paranoid. Whatever hit me was long gone, right? So I turned and walked home. By the time I got back, my mom was up, rushing to get ready for work. She scolded me for sneaking out again, and I just mumbled an apology, tossing my wetsuit into the shower. But something felt wrong. I couldn't shake it. Even the house felt quieter than usual. I was halfway through putting on my school uniform when I heard them. Sirens. At first, I thought it was a car crash on the main road, but the noise kept growing. More shouting, more panic. I ran outside, barefoot, still buttoning my shirt. Everyone was heading toward the beach. When I got there, a crowd had already gathered along the dunes. Police cars, lifeguards, people crying, yelling for others to move back. Out in the water, maybe 200 yards offshore, a red cloud spread slowly across the surface. For a few seconds, my mind couldn't process what I was seeing. Then it hit me. Tina. Someone screamed her name, and it felt like the air was sucked out of the world. They said the shark was enormous, 6 meters at least. Fishermen had spotted it days earlier, circling their nets, warning everyone to stay out of the water. But no one had seen it since, until that morning. It had been waiting. The rescue boats searched for hours, combing every inch of the bay. They found her red cap floating near the rocks, nothing else. When the story came out later, I couldn't breathe reading it. The shark, they said, had probably been the same one that rammed my board. It didn't leave the bay. It stayed there, waiting. And when she swam out that morning, the same stretch of water I had just left, it struck. One bite, that's all it took. They said she died almost instantly. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that jolt again, the hit from below, and saw her walking into the water. And I saw myself turning away. The guilt ate at me. I told myself she wouldn't have listened anyway. She'd been swimming there for years, said she knew the ocean better than anyone. But deep down, I knew I could have tried. Even now, 20 years later, I still can't stand in deep water without feeling that cold pull beneath me. Sometimes when I visit home, I walk by the beach early in the morning. The light hits the waves just right, golden, calm, peaceful. And for a moment, it's beautiful again. But if you stand there long enough and listen, you can almost hear the ocean breathe. Not softly, but like something alive. Something that remembers. The ocean didn't spare me out of mercy. It simply wasn't hungry enough. So if you ever find yourself out there, alone, floating over dark water, don't think for a second that you're safe. Because beneath you, something ancient might already be watching and waiting for you to stop moving. It was one of my first open water dives, a calm, overcast morning at a freshwater lake a few hours from home. The surface looked still and harmless, like a pane of dark glass stretching into the fog. But underneath, the water was the color of rust. You couldn't see more than 20 feet before everything disappeared into this murky, brown-green haze. I remember being excited, though nervous, the kind of nervous that makes your breathing sound louder inside your mask. We descended one by one, the line of us sinking slowly into the dim light, until the surface became nothing more than a faint shimmer above. My heart was racing, bubbles hissing steadily from my regulator, and I told myself, just stick to the plan. We were supposed to go down, loop around a ridge at the bottom, then come back up the slope. Easy enough. But I ended up drifting toward the back of the group, and at first it didn't seem like a big deal. Not until the visibility started to close in around me like fog thickening into darkness. The water down there felt heavy. Every time I kicked my fins, clouds of silt would rise, curling like smoke, swallowing everything around me. And then, in an instant, the faint flickers of fins ahead vanished completely. I was alone. I turned slowly, expecting to see someone's flashlight beam or at least a trail of bubbles, but there was nothing. No glow from above, no bottom below, just this endless, suffocating brown void pressing in on all sides. That's when I realized I was sinking. Panic surged through me. I reached for my buoyancy control, trying to inflate, fumbling with the hose, and that brief distraction was enough to lose all sense of direction. I had no idea which way was up anymore. I tried exhaling. That's the rule, right? Follow your bubbles. But when I breathed out, they didn't rise. They just hung there, suspended, tiny silver orbs frozen in place. For a second, I thought I'd gone insane. Then, slowly, they drifted upwards, lazily, like the water itself was resisting. I followed them, kicking hard, flashlight beam cutting through the murk. That's when something glinted below me, just a brief flash, like metal catching light. I stopped, hovering, heartbeat pounding in my ears. Every instinct screamed, "Go up," but curiosity won. I turned back, lowering myself toward that faint reflection. It looked like jewelry, maybe a ring, half buried in the sand. Gold,
catching the faint beam of my light. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed away the silt. That's when I froze. The ring wasn't lying in the mud. It was on a hand.
A human hand, pale, bloated, the skin stretched and gray, swaying slightly with the current. For a second, I couldn't even move. My light trembled as it passed over stiff, waterlogged fingers. And then I saw the wrist. It wasn't attached to anything. The flesh ended in a jagged white stump of bone, cleanly severed. I kicked back in horror, almost losing my regulator. My breathing spiked, air rushing out fast, bubbles roaring around my head. But some part of me, the small, terrified, rational part, whispered that I couldn't just leave it there. That was evidence. Someone needed to see this. So, forcing every ounce of courage I had, I went back down. I grabbed it gently by the wrist. The skin was cold and rubbery, slick under my gloves. The ring was still tight on the finger, a thin band of gold with tiny initials engraved inside. I'll never forget them. T.W. I tucked the hand against my vest, praying it wouldn't slip free, and began to ascend. It felt like forever. The water seemed thicker, heavier, like it didn't want to let me go. When I finally saw the faint light of the surface, I kicked harder than I ever had before.
Breaking through, I gasped, tearing up my regulator, and screamed for help. My instructor was the first to reach me. When he saw what I was holding, his face went pale. He didn't even speak for a full 5 seconds, just stared, before yelling for the others. An hour later, the police arrived. They took the hand, bagged it, wrote down coordinates, asked questions I barely remember answering. They promised to send divers to search the area. That was the last I heard of it. No updates, no reports, nothing in the local news. A few weeks later, I went back to that same lake, just to look at it. The water was calm again, glistening under the sun, almost peaceful. I asked a few locals if they'd heard about any discovery, a body or remains, but they all shook their heads. They said no one came, no one searched, no one found a thing. That silence has haunted me more than anything. To this day, I still don't know whose hand I found, how it got there, or why the investigation just stopped. I still dive, but never in lakes anymore. There's something about that murky water, the way it swallows sound, light, and reason, that I can't stand. In the ocean, at least, you know what's hunting you. But down there, in the stillness of the lake, something waits beneath the silt, something that doesn't want to be found. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if that wasn't the only hand down there. Maybe it was just the one that drifted high enough for me to see.
I've been in the Navy for years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that life aboard an aircraft carrier can mess with your head. Days blur together, the noise never really stops, and you start to forget what silence even sounds like. But what happened a few years ago, that was different. That was something none of us were prepared for. There was this young woman stationed just a few sections away from our shop. Everyone knew her, friendly, focused, always kept to herself but never rude. Her berthing area was close to ours, just a short walk down a narrow corridor that always smelled faintly of diesel and metal. Then, one night, she was gone. Word spread fast. She'd taken her own life, hung herself in one of the storage compartments. I remember the silence in the mess hall that morning. No one said a word, but everyone's face said the same thing. Why? After that, the compartment where it happened changed. Not officially, of course. It wasn't sealed off or anything, but people just stopped going there. You could feel it when you passed that section. The air felt heavier. like the ship itself knew what had happened and didn't want to talk about it. A few nights later, one of my shopmates was getting ready to rack out. It was late, maybe past midnight. He said he'd just pulled off his boots when he noticed movement from across the room. There, in a chair by the far wall, sat a woman. Not a blur, not a trick of the light. He said he saw her clearly. Same uniform, same face. Just sitting there, looking straight at him. He screamed, bolted out, and wouldn't step foot back in that compartment for the rest of the night. We thought maybe stress was getting to him. You live packed in with hundreds of people, never any real privacy, never proper sleep. Your mind plays games. That's what I told myself anyway. But curiosity has a way of eating at you. A week after her death, I found myself walking toward that very same space. It was late, the lights were dim, and the only sounds were the hum of the engines and my own boots echoing down the passageway. I stopped at the doorway. Just standing there felt wrong, like I was intruding. Still, I stepped in. The moment I crossed the threshold, a metallic scream tore through the compartment. A sound so loud and raw, it made my teeth ache. It wasn't feedback, it wasn't machinery. It was like the ship itself cried out. I turned and ran. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I was halfway down the next corridor. Later, I learned that right after that incident, one of the ship's electrical systems tied to that compartment went completely dead. No power, no explanation. Dead for over 2 weeks. Systems fail all the time out at sea. We all know that. But this one, the timing felt too precise. The failure started right after she died, right after the sightings began. Even now, no one likes going near that space alone. Maintenance crews take the long way around. People keep their voices low when they walk past it. Sometimes, when I'm on late-night watch and the corridors are empty, I catch myself glancing down that passage, half expecting to see her sitting there in the dark again, quiet, waiting, like she never really left the ship at all.
I worked offshore for close to a decade, mostly on drill ships and production rigs.
If you've ever spent time out there, you know how strange those places can get. Once the engines quiet down and all you hear is the slow, hollow creak of metal over open water, your mind starts to notice everything. Every echo, every flicker of light. A few years back, I was part of a small maintenance crew sent to a drill ship that had been sitting idle for months. It was moored about 40 miles off the coast, a black silhouette in the middle of nowhere. Our job was simple: get the systems checked, prep the place before the next contract started. Just 5 of us: me, 2 engineers, an electrician, and a safety tech. From the moment we stepped aboard, something felt off. Usually, even quiet rigs hum with energy, the constant background vibration of power running through the decks. But this one was cold, dead quiet. No power below deck, no air systems, no running generators. Just the sound of our boots echoing down endless metal corridors, like we were walking inside a giant tomb. We set up portable lights and started our checks. Everything seemed routine, at first. That evening, I was down near the engine room with one of the engineers when we both froze. A deep rumble rolled through the hull, the unmistakable sound of a massive motor winding up somewhere below. It lasted maybe 5 seconds, then stopped dead. We radioed the control room immediately, asking if anyone was testing equipment. They said no, all generators were isolated, power was fully disconnected. We double-checked the panels ourselves. No heat signatures, no vibration, no current flow. It was like the ship had just come alive for a moment, and then gone back to sleep. Later that night, I was in the control room going through maintenance logs when it happened again. The overhead lights flickered, not random, 2 slow, steady pulses. Then every monitor in the console booted up at once. The displays came to life, showing live readouts, drill depth, pump pressure, fuel flow, all of it active data. On a system with no power,
I just stood there, staring, watching the numbers move like the rig was working again. And then, after maybe 10 seconds, everything blinked out. The lights steadied. The monitors went black. Dead silence again. I checked the breakers, the relays, the panels. Nothing. Not a single blip in the voltage logs. It was as if the ship had pretended to turn on. A ghost circuit, mimicking life. No one slept much that night. By morning, we tried to laugh it off over breakfast. One of the guys joked maybe the old rig missed working. Maybe it was just trying to warm up. Nobody laughed. When it came time for us to leave, we started loading our gear onto the supply boat. A new team was arriving. Contractors, engineers, replacements for the next shift. One of them asked how things had been on board. I told him the truth, that it was weird as hell. Flickering lights, strange noises. Felt like the rig was trying to start itself up. He just smiled. That half smile people give when they know something you don't, and said, "Yeah." That one's got a story. He told me a mechanic had died there a few years back, crushed in the engine room during a hydraulic test, died instantly. And ever since, people said the place acted up. Lights would flicker, pumps would hum, systems would boot up for a few seconds, then die again. Always short bursts, never enough to trace. He said it like it was no big deal, just another offshore rumor. We finished loading, shook hands, and I climbed onto the boat. As we drifted away, I looked back at the rig. From the distance, it was just a black skeleton against the horizon, motionless. But right before we lost sight of it, I saw something, just for a second. A faint orange glow flickered through the control room window, like the monitors had come alive again. Could have been sunlight hitting the glass, could have been my imagination. But sometimes, when I think back on it, I wonder, maybe that rig never really powered down. Maybe some part of it's still running, deep inside the steel, still waiting for a command that'll never come.